change is not only possible, but with the right intention, with the right mentality, and with a little bit of challenging what your belief systems are, can actually become simple. We're talking about you today. We're talking about you making profound changes and shifts into better relationships, happy, fulfilling partnerships.
Hey everybody, Jeff here. Before we get started, if you're getting value from the podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For those of you listening on podcast apps, don't forget to rate and review. Your support really helps the show reach more people, and for that, I am truly grateful. Now let's dive in.
Welcome to The Point with Jeff Spikes, the show about achieving goals, embracing growth, and finding your true path. And now, here's your host, Jeff Spikes.
Hello, and welcome to The Point. This is your host, Jeff Spikes, and what a beautiful opportunity today to discuss change and how change happens, change of seasons, change of weather conditions within a season, temperatures go up and down, changes from night to day. What are all of the immediate, obvious changes do you notice that are happening around you right now? Changes of the wind. Think about it. Is change blank? How do you fill that in? Change is blank. What's your word? You know, when I look at it as the proof of change that makes something unrecognizable from what it was before. 10 years ago, walking into the Phoenix Veterans Administration was quite a problem. There were, if you look back in the news as the Phoenix Veterans Administration challenges and struggles that they've had over the years, there were a lot of, it was national news that it was an extremely bad situation there, and that the VA culture and the VA medical service to veterans needed to change. And Phoenix was right dead center in the target of the news and of that need for change, the example of how bad it could be. Imagine walking into any doctor anywhere, and you have a couple of things going on that you want to have looked at. You want to schedule an appointment with your doctor, and you call on a Tuesday hoping to get in that week. When do you expect that you can get in? Imagine calling on a Tuesday and being able to get in on a Thursday or a Friday. Let's say that you choose the Friday morning 7 a.m. appointment, and you get there a little bit early and go in and sit down, and by 7:15 you're in the doctor's office being seen by your primary care physician. They're going through the history and catching up and then wanting to talk to you about the few things that are happening. You need to see a dermatologist, you need to get some lab work done, and you need to have a CAT scan done. And that CAT scan needs to be done with dye to look for challenges in your abdomen. See the doc. They add the notes and do all the things that they need to in the system, and they make some calls. They put some things in the computer and tell you, okay, go downstairs to the third floor and turn left, and I want you to go check in with imaging. I want you to check in with specialty, and I want you to specialty labs, and then check in with the lab. And by the time that you're walking downstairs at 7:45, you go in and you're able to have all three of those appointments handled right away. You're leaving the doctor's office, the clinic area, by 10 a.m. in the morning, having had all three tests completed and a full checkup by your doctor. Can you imagine that type of ease and flow and effortlessness of needing to have a couple of things done all at once? Well, that was my experience at the Phoenix Veterans Administration this past week, and that was unheard of. The experience most veterans will tell you, even today in many places, is that you call, you check for an appointment, and you're 2 to 3 months out before you can schedule. That is unrecognizable change, considering the problems that were happening at the Phoenix Veterans Administration 10, 12 years ago. That's such a drastic change that they not only pushed through getting better and improving what was absolutely terrible, they moved away from the terrible service they were providing, and they looked at all of the mistakes that were happening, and they put in corrections and made things better. And then they didn't stop at good enough. They didn't just stop with this big drastic move that made things better for a while and retrace back to old standards. What did happen is investments were made, and they looked at a holistic and more a bigger picture of what ideal care would really look like, and a whole lot of time and effort went into designing a better system, something that would work better for taking care of veterans, so that veterans would be more apt to actually go into the VA and get help. Encouragement, note to self, if you're a veteran or if you know a veteran, especially a veteran that has a disability that qualifies for ongoing care at the VA, and you're avoiding it, you might want to check it out today. As a matter of fact, I encourage you to check it out, or have your friend that's a vet go in and check it out. It's really gotten better. Now, if you've been watching this for the term of the show's life, and if you're a veteran and you've seen some of the shares and talks that I've given nationally for veterans, you know that there's a program or there's a way of behaving that is a odd little way to win, but it's the left foot yes. It's the every time your left foot hits the ground, you say the word yes. Bunch of veterans started doing that. It started with two of us, and we caught each other, and we tried that, but when we forgot and stopped doing it, but we'd start going to the VA and using that method, and what happens in the mind and how that opens up your possibilities of what is good and to notice what's happening that's good is an amazing shift that can happen for you if you go to the VA. I challenge vets all over the country that to try it, as odd as it may seem to you, or is perfectly making sense. If it makes perfect sense to you, try it. But every time you have a VA appointment, that morning when you wake up or on your way to the appointment, as soon as you can think of it, say yes every time your left foot hits the ground, and certainly do it from the parking lot into the building and see what happens differently for you. We know now, regardless of whatever steps it took, that it's possible. Now, another thing to think about, experts believe, and it's well known, people can go through significant changes in their psyche and in their, you can go through a significant change. The type of change where one day you like chocolate, it's one of your favorite things. You wake up the next morning and you don't. There's documented history, there's documented events of people having such a significant change from one day to the next. And there's usually some type of major life event that happens from in that time frame. There's also significant life events that can happen that have someone completely change. In the Clifton Strengths model, some people will find that all of a sudden a strength that's consistently in their top 5 when they've taken the assessment, 20 years later, all of a sudden drops off completely and it's really low. Well, and then when digging and discussing what happens, you'll find that there was some life event that had this major shift in their belief about how well that strength was actually working for them, or some cause and effect type of thought process that said that working in that strength created such a bad result or some type of an issue that it was significant enough to completely shift it out of your being. And other chaos and other types of traumatic events can happen and make a significant change in who you are. So now we have a few instances where you can consider and evaluate and investigate and confirm that change, drastic, unrecognizable change can happen. So now that's a good way to challenge your belief on what you think change is all about. That certainly also does substantiate a belief that it takes some crisis, drama, trauma, intense situation, life-changing event for change to happen. But what if you could intentionally unwrap and unpack and unwind that process of what happens from a major life event, and then intentionally take the steps that create the change internally, so that you can start driving any change you are interested in driving. And then challenge your beliefs on how simple or effective it is. I've had some instances in the last 6 months with some clients working the designing strengths model where we were in a failure to launch in a business way. Um, they were training in how to run their business, and they were training in some of the things they needed to do to have a successful business, but they weren't able to move the needle and actually be in business, and through that designing and gain customers and promote themselves and get the word out, not even an announcement in the cases that we're specifically sharing with you. Through that designing process, what was found was that perfect, pertinent, specific messaging that made all the sense in the world and that felt really good and drove a conviction and an excitement that they felt this deep responsibility to want to move forward. Now that was coming from a place that they started in a place of confusion of all the tools that exist and all the things that they had to go after, and some lack of clarity of the actual service they're about to perform or their ability to perform and exactly how they were going to execute. And through this process, that entire package and message and mission and values unpack and became very clear. And they were able to fit themselves into then a system that would help them promote themselves, into methods that would help them promote themselves, and very quickly had amazing results. Funny thing about the designing process, there's unrecognizable change that can be driven through behaviors and through considering what motivation is and the stages of change. And there's science to that. And we can take all of those steps through the stages of change using a system of clearly understanding what motivates us, what motivates you, and what your preferred methods of processing are, and how you think, and start making some pretty standard changes that drive immediate change. And that's pretty noticeable, and you become unrecognizable from who you were before. Something that was very challenging becomes very simple, and you notice all of a sudden that you're doing it. Now that's change that you're driving intentionally. What about unrecognizable change, where when the change process becomes simple enough and easy enough, you realize you're all of a sudden doing things that you weren't capable of a month ago, and or 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and you're deep enough into the result and wondering how that just became possible. Well, here's what happens in the designing strengths process. This is imagine the excitement of this pop of shift, this just light bulb moment that goes on when you realize that anything really is possible with the right intention. The process you can be clear of in life as you grow up and go through your teens and into your 20s, and then somewhere near your 30s, you end up in a situation where you have a routine and you've implemented ways of being for yourself that are now attached to your identity and don't seem like they're capable of being changed. You've automated behaviors, thoughts, and beliefs that continue to get a certain result. And if you've done that in an environment that's created amazing results for you, then fantastic. But if they're not the results you want, and if they're not the results you want in any area, right? Because sometimes you'll find that you have ended up in a great spot in some areas, but other things have fallen off and not been so well. You did fantastic in business, but your relationships at home aren't that great, or your relationships at all aren't that great in work and business, or relationships are fantastic, and you're helping a lot of people and you're admired, but the flow isn't there. That money isn't, the reward isn't there. The energetic exchange, and you're finding valuing yourself isn't working as well as you'd like. Whatever it is, oftentimes you'll find one thing is going really well because you focus on it, and other things are falling. You might consider yourself juggling or trying to keep all the plates in the air, and these models that just don't necessarily have to fit anymore with what we know now about how the mind works and the physical and the mental things that can be done to anchor new beliefs and new systems that deliver change quickly. So one of the things that happens is in the designing process, we work with specifically helping you find your passions, things that you're really passionate about, but are nuanced in the way of that you're passionate enough about them that they really excite you and get you and drive that motivation so that setting a short-term goal towards something that you're really excited about naturally is easier to do than something else that is not such a passion. It's something you think you need to do or must do or just think would be a good idea. There's not that oomph and the passion to it. And you may have seen some of the content in the lists that come out in the encouragement to make a list and really take time to consider all the things you've ever done in life that you think are really cool and think about how it felt to when it was cool when you were a young kid and you ran a certain way and you felt so cool in how confident you must have looked and how good you looked running or who you looked like running or walking or twirling, anything, climbing a tree, all the way down to these things and then all the way up to an accomplishment you've had at work or a relationship that went really well, someone you met and an experience you created with them that was so cool. And think about it. It can even be something that caused trouble or wasn't the best decision as long as you thought it was cool. And just really capture and list those things because that's one of the ways that you begin to consider how what fulfills you and what you're good at and what helps you feel strong. And off of that basis, you can then help pick something that you're really passionate about. These are ways to unlock and open the doors to something new to consider for yourself. As a matter of fact, some of that process is a great quick win that you can use for yourself or share with others. Just do that and notice how you feel and how much more emotionally resourceful you are than if you've spent time focusing on what hasn't worked well in your life or what you don't want to repeat and what you're moving away from, what you would prefer not to ever have happen again. If you focus on the things you think are mistakes or things that should be improved, notice the feeling you have. And go back to the idea of all the things that you ever thought were cool or amazing or fun and list those things and really sink into those feelings. So you pick this passion and then you set these and you understand what it is you really like that motivates you, that makes you feel cool or excited or good. Then you set a short-term goal or two or three, but we usually start with one or two. And you start designing this goal and how you want to move forward to it in a short term. In a short term, you can then pick through assessments that you've taken or done, or personal assessments through asking friends and loved ones specific questions and asking yourself some questions. So, with all these answers you get from this organic way of considering what your strengths are, understanding how you process, and understanding some of how you use words and how you prefer to think that you just naturally do, and understanding maybe assessments like Clifton Strengths are phenomenal for this. And you can actually start making statements and start crafting ways of being that you believe that would be best for you to execute and act in that will move you towards that goal. And then it's very easy in a short-term goal to shift it up and try something different. So sitting with a coach to give you that third view, that outside opinion that's not attached to any of the ways of being or the beliefs and all those automations, can it really be useful to give you some ideas of how to move forward? Well, then what happens is the evidence is we've had clients that were practicing moving forward towards creating a better message and a better understanding of what they're gifted in that really does benefit others and how they learn a process better so that they can better learn and what they need to learn to launch the business enterprise they're launching. And in these instances, what happens is 2 to 3 months later, you find that one exercise of testing gives you a new way of approaching getting things done, getting anything done. and that it naturally, your unconscious mind naturally adopts it and pulls it into your normal life. And you naturally find that you're doing things that previously would have been a grind or a challenge, or you would have felt like you needed to force it. And instead, you're sitting there fulfilled and excited. A feedback came in that since the meeting we had had, they hadn't stopped writing on their plans and diagramming the potential of where their business was going to go. And they had hit a plateau. And it was a great business. It was sustaining their lifestyle, and everything was good in that effect, but they really wanted to grow it and make it something better, and have it not just sustain their lifestyle, but also sustain their future and start supporting them and increasing towards their actual dreams and the goals for their children and other things. And they got so excited that it naturally just began to happen. And they came up with new titles for themselves and a new organization for this company of what it needs to look like for them to grow, that just naturally happened. And it naturally happened out of a consideration of the process of what designing strengths looks like, and the consideration of what could happen, mirrored with where they're how they're wired and how they actually show up. So they got out of the judgment and opinion and the fear of hurting each other's feelings of what their role should be or who's really leading where, and really moved into a more intuitive space, and were so excited. So for 3 or 4 days, all they could do was sit and diagram and plan and feel this amazing feeling. And what they were feeling was this intense amount of emotional resourcefulness that increased their capacity and made change simpler and easier. So a lot of things changed very quickly, and the way they felt was full of energy and capacity. Can you imagine something, and can you remember something that you were so excited about that you wanted to tell friends about it or family about it, and it was difficult to sleep? You just couldn't wait to tell people, or you were telling people, therefore you weren't sleeping. You were so excited, and you stayed up all night to work on something because you were so excited for the result. That's the excitement. That's the feeling that you get to tap into when you start nurturing these other ideas. Well, in another case, it was a very similar situation, but in that case, it was 3 months down the road, looking back and saying, I'm a completely different person, was what the client feedback was. It was, I'm doing entirely different things than what I was before. And the things that we're getting to imagine, step back a minute, take a deep breath and imagine that something that felt difficult and that was challenging for you, you've done now 3 or 4 times easily and effortlessly. And then you realize that, man, how did all this just happen? And how did I connect all these things? And how did this client show up, and this customer and this opportunity all of a sudden show up? And now I'm in a place of abundance, and my business taking off, or whatever it is that you're looking to accomplish. In the debrief, you learn and you realize, wow, going through that process unlocked these things that just naturally became part of how I'm doing things. And I no longer have the belief that that can't happen, or that it's too hard, or that it's a challenge, and things are more easy and effortless. So that's the key to designing strengths, is that when these things happen, you just think you're doing a great job. You're like, how am I doing so much of a better job? And sometimes it's just that simple, because you were able to challenge the belief that's protecting the value, and then alter what you're valuing in the decisions you're making, and therefore changing the behaviors. When you change on a value-based level and change the beliefs that are protecting that value, all the behaviors naturally shift and change. When you take on the identity of the person does not have the problems you used to have, You take on the identity of someone with different problems, the problems change, the behaviors change, the challenges and opportunities change. But that's working intentionally. And it's literally doing the same thing that you've already done in your life to end up somewhere and getting a result you're not necessarily enthusiastic about, or maybe you're even unhappy about. And it's doing the same things that you did to end up there, but in a very intentional way that makes it a very fast process and can quickly have you in a new place. Consider change and consider what unrecognizable change is. What would be so perfect and amazing if you were in this ideal state that was completely unrecognizable from who you were? And then think about unrecognizable change in that you're naturally changing and moving towards exactly what it is that you want and that ideal outcome that you've designed, not realizing that you've changed because it feels so natural and effortless. Both are possible, both are true, both can happen, knowing that these major things that were terrible that had changed and become entirely different. The Veterans Administration, absolutely just unimaginable change happened in that any veteran could go to a clinic and have three specialists see them within a 3 hour window, showing up at 7, leaving by 10, and having a full, complete experience with a general practitioner visit and 3 specialists and all tests done, and you're out the door. Nothing scheduled for 30, 60, 90 days out. Now you're waiting for the results, which you'd be waiting for anyway, just not 90 or 60 days later. That is unrecognizable from what the VA has used to be. And depending on where you are in the country, and if you deal with the VA at all, the VA you go to may not be as ideal as that, but if you start using left foot yes as you walk in the door, you're guaranteed a better experience. You're guaranteed a better experience. It's uncanny how amazing that is. But that's another thing that if you take for proving and test, you will find that that's another piece of evidence that says, wow, change can happen. And sometimes the change is in you. If you have a discomfort or you're having a challenge, that's your challenge. That's your discomfort that you have the opportunity to resolve. Change is not only possible, but with the right intention, with the right mentality, and with a little bit of challenging what your belief systems are, it can actually become simple. It can be as simple as the wind changes where it doesn't feel like you can control it. And there's lots of patents out there now about people that are trying to control weather and change weather. So we know that it's something that can also try and be controlled and people want to change. We're talking about you today. We're talking about you making profound changes and shifts into better relationships, happy, fulfilling partnerships, amazing, uplifting relationships with your children, with your friends, with your business partners, with your coworkers, a flow of finances that allows you to make the impact you want to make in the world around you. Same thing can happen with finances and changing your belief to money. You can change your beliefs and values towards nutrition and food. You can change your beliefs and values towards exercise or body physique and how you want to look. You can do that with spirituality. You can put categories together and stop juggling and trying to hold up all the plates and just work on being optimal in every section with every bucket you choose, and allow yourself to relax and then push things back up to optimal and just keep your life optimal. What beliefs would you need to have about you, your surroundings, the people in your life, and the possibilities to make something like that happen? What are the beliefs you'd need to have to actually live in an optimal state, allowing yourself to relax and live in the moment and then do the work needed to keep bumping up those things so that you're in a constant growth pattern and never worrying about anything falling apart and hitting the floor and needing to completely resurrect or change something from the ground up again? What are the possibilities for you with your current beliefs? And what are the possibilities for you if you change them? unrecognizable change is here for you. It's ready for you. All it takes is action. So join us on the journey of designing strengths. Get a piece out of life that you know is possible and have been having a struggle getting to. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week.
The show about achieving goals.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of The Point with me, Jeff Spikes. Please visit jeffspikes.com for everything you would need to know to engage with me offline. And lastly, thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration. This is The Point.